The story of King Solomon's temple has always held a central place in Masonic ritual. Within the degrees of Freemasonry, the temple is more than an ancient building. It is a symbol of wisdom, order, and divine architecture. Yet for both Masonic scholars and biblical historians, Solomon's temple remains one of history's great mysteries, a subject that continues to inspire debate, wonder, and fascination. One particular feature of that temple, mentioned briefly in the ritual of the second degree, has sparked centuries of study and speculation. The winding staircase. Every fellow craft mason symbolically ascends it, passing through the porch by a flight of winding stairs to the middle chamber, there to receive his wages. It is a striking image, a staircase leading from the entrance of the temple up through the sanctuary to higher chambers of light and reward. But was there really such a staircase? Or is it a purely symbolic creation of Masonic teaching? The ritual gives three clear statements. 1. That a winding staircase existed in King Solomon's temple. 2. That it began from the porchway. And 3. That the workmen ascended these stairs to receive their wages in the middle chamber. To the candidate, these details seem presented as fact. But as every serious researcher soon discovers, the writers of Masonic ritual were more concerned with moral and dramatic effect than with historical precision. Biblical scholars and archaeologists differ widely in their interpretations, and few would support the exact picture given in our ritual. The only historical sources we have are found in 3 books of the Old Testament, and in the writings of the Jewish historian Josephus. Of these, the oldest and most accepted description of Solomon's temple appears in the first book of Kings, chapter 6. It reads, "And it came to pass, in the 480th year after the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, that Solomon began to build the house of the Lord." Then in verse 5, "And against the wall of the house he built chambers round about." And in verse 8, the key passage, "The door for the middle chamber was in the right side of the house. And they went up with winding stairs into the middle chamber, and out of the middle into the third." This is the only direct mention of a winding staircase in all of Scripture. But when studied closely, this verse raises problems. It says the entrance door to the middle chamber was on the right side of the house, and that one went up with winding stairs from that door, first to the middle chamber, and then to the third. There is no mention of any ground, floor, entrance, or staircase beginning from the porchway. So even in the Bible itself, the structure differs from what Masonic ritual suggests. The second book of Chronicles, chapter 3, describes the temple again, but makes no reference to a staircase at all. Verse 9 simply states, "And he overlaid the upper chambers with gold." Most scholars believe these upper chambers are the same side chambers described in Kings. Yet again, no winding stairs. The book of Ezekiel, written after the temple's destruction, gives a third version. In chapter 41, verses 6 and 7, it describes 3 sets of side chambers built in layers, one above another, and says, "There was an enlarging and a winding about still upward. Therefore the breadth of the house increased from the lowest chamber to the highest by the midst." But Ezekiel does not speak of a staircase, only that the chambers themselves wound around the house. Some interpret this to mean a spiral arrangement of galleries or passageways, not a literal stair. What emerges is a pattern of inconsistencies. Our Masonic image of the winding staircase comes mainly from the translation known as the Authorized Version, the King James Bible. But the translators of that version struggled with the Hebrew text and left many notes of uncertainty in their manuscripts. Certain Hebrew words in the verse were obscure or even defective, forcing translators to make educated guesses. One of these words is Lullim, translated in the King James Version as winding stairs. Yet scholars point out that this word appears nowhere else in the Old Testament. A related word, Lullim, appears later in Jewish writings such as the Mishnah and Talmud, where it refers not to stairs but to trap doors, or openings through which workmen were lowered in baskets. The Jewish Encyclopedia even defines Lullim as trapdoors, though it admits the evidence is uncertain. If so, the original text may have described vertical openings rather than a staircase. Another uncertain word is Tichonah, translated as middle. Modern translators often render it as lower, which changes the meaning of the verse entirely. The biblical scholar Dr. James Moffat, in his 1924 translation, wrote, "The entrance into the lower side rooms was on the south side of the temple. You climbed to the middle row, and from the middle to the top row, through trap doors." Similarly, the 1965 English edition of the Jewish Bible reads, "The entrance to the lower story was at the right-hand corner of the temple, and access to the middle story above was by trap doors, and so from the middle story to the third," in both translations. No winding stairs. So what, then, might the temple have contained? Some scholars believe that if a winding staircase existed, it was built within the thickness of the walls, serving the side chambers that surrounded the temple. These side rooms may have been used during construction as wage rooms or workshops, and later as treasuries, where gifts and sacred items were stored. Supporting this idea is the account by the Jewish historian Josephus, who wrote in the Antiquities of the Jews, "The king also had a fine contrivance for an ascent to the upper room over the temple, and that was by steps in the thickness of its wall, for it had no large door on the east end as the lower house had, but the entrances were by the sides through very small doors." This description suggests something closer to hidden stone stairs within the wall, not a grand open staircase through the main sanctuary. Unfortunately, no physical remains of Solomon's temple survive. Successive conquests and centuries of destruction erased all trace of the original structure. Archaeologists have uncovered nothing of the temple's foundations, leaving us only the words of scripture and tradition. Whether the ascent was by a winding staircase, trapdoors, or a spiral of side chambers, the mystery remains. And perhaps it was meant to. For the Freemason, the winding staircase is more than a point of history. It is a symbol of progress, of the journey each Mason undertakes from ignorance to enlightenment. Every step represents an effort to climb higher in knowledge, virtue, and understanding. The uncertainty that surrounds the literal staircase mirrors the uncertainty of life itself, for each of us must ascend through faith, perseverance, and work, without ever fully seeing what lies above. Whether or not King Solomon's temple ever had such stairs may never be known, but the lesson of the winding staircase endures, that advancement in life and masonry must always be earned, step by step, through labor, patience, and the pursuit of truth. The winding staircase may never be found in stone, but it forever rises in the heart of every true Mason.